Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. An original adaptation written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Part 13. The Hidden Castle. Gawain rode towards the castle, slumping in the saddle in sheer exhaustion. Even despite his tiredness, he marvelled at what a fine castle it was. It was, quite simply, flawless, the equal to, or perhaps better of, Camelot itself. If Gawain had been asked to draw the castle of his dreams, this would be it. Ringed by trees, it was set within a meadow clearing, where it stood bold and tall. It had 3 sets of stout walls before the main towers of the castle could be reached, each one with strong gates and a barbican. The castle proper was well defended too, with a full moat and a drawbridge, and even from this distance Gawain could see that the ramparts and battlements were sturdy and strong. For all its martial, warlike structure, though, it was far from ugly. The stone was all cut from a rich white seam, and so skillfully laid that it looked as though the castle were carved out of one solid piece, not built brick by brick. The tops of the towers had conical crowns, in a style Gawain had heard of, but never seen in Britain. As he rode closer, he could see that the tower tops were all covered in carvings and designs of saints and angels. Riding through the outer walls, he saw each ring held trees and gardens and orchards. "What is this place?" he asked himself, "and why have I never heard of it before?" Gringalet carried him forward, and he paused before the drawbridge as the porter looked down on him. "Please let him be friendly," said the voice in his head, "because you look like a fearful sight." Gawain could only guess quite how hideous he looked at that moment, but from the dented state of the armour he could see, and the battered feeling of his body within it, he guessed he looked far from his best. The bearded man who looked down on him took in the whole image of a bruised and battered knight, and his face split in a sympathetic smile. "You look like a man in need of shelter," said the porter. "Indeed I am," replied Gawain. The cold was setting in now, and with all his strength used up, he was finding it hard to keep his teeth from chattering. "Well, you have come to the right place," said the man, and with a wave of his hand the drawbridge was dropped, and Gringalet led Gawain across. As soon as he was over, he hugged his horse's neck. "Thank you, my friend," he told the horse. "I shall buy you a whole bushel of apples." He tried to dismount, but his body was so stiff and aching that he had to have attendants help him down. Gradually, Gawain was led up to the main keep, where he was quite surprised that he kept his feet beneath him as he crossed the entrance hall and was led to a seat by a blazing fire. A glass of spiced wine was pressed into his hands, and he was given a warm cloak to put over his dented armour, as word was sent to the castle's lord. Slowly, the warmth of the fire and the wine seeped into his body, and he began to feel more human. A basin of water was brought, and Gawain cleaned himself up as best he could. Soon an attendant came to fetch him. "The lord of the castle would like to meet you, if your lordship is so inclined," the man said politely. "I'm no lord," Gawain told the man. "Just a bruised and battered knight who may need a hand up." He gave the attendant a warm smile and immediately regretted it as he discovered several cuts across his lips where the dragon had smashed them into his own teeth. The servant helped him up, though, and Gawain walked delicately behind him. As he entered the great hall, the music stopped, and all eyes turned to him. For Gawain, though, his eyes were roaming all over. The hall was stunning, with vaulted ceilings dressed with arched timbers all painted brightly and decorated with gold. The hall was that same silky smooth white stone, and with the firelight dancing across it, it looked warm and inviting. The flagstones on the floor were a golden yellow, and all about the place were fine rugs and tapestries bringing warmth and colour. The Christmas celebrations were clearly in flow, for the room was filled with people all dressed in their finery. In his scratched and dented armour, Gawain felt like an ugly stain on a velvet cloth, but he did his best to straighten his back and stride forward with as much grace as he possessed. The lord of the castle, in his fine carved chair, was also a sight to behold. Tall and broad, he looked powerful and strong, but his eyes, a sparkling sea green with creases at the corners, stopped him feeling fierce and imposing. His dark hair, shot through with silver, hung down around his face like a shaggy mane, and his neat, well-groomed beard gave the impression of a good-natured badger on a friendly forest path. He sat still in his chair, watching Gawain approach, but everything about him gave a sense of life and energy and movement, like he might leap from his chair at a moment's notice and begin a lively dance. As Gawain approached, he did indeed stand, but not to dance. Instead, he opened his arms wide and spoke in a clear voice that carried across the room. "Welcome, Sir Gawain of the Green Axe. I am Lord Bertilac de Hut Desert. This here is my home, and right glad we are to have you as our honoured guest this Christmas time. Please, step forward that we may all see you better." He gestured Gawain forwards and he walked on. "Thank you, my lord," he said apologetically, "though I fear I am not dressed for such fine occasions as I have interrupted here. My apologies to all your guests." Indeed, some of the guests around the hall were staring at Gawain with no small amount of shock as he limped towards Lord Bertilac, and some were staring with outright scorn at his shabby appearance. Lord Bertilac, though, dismissed it all. "Nonsense," boomed the man. "Your arrival here is nothing more or less than a gift. Why, we've all danced too long anyway, and it's time to hear some stories of danger and daring-do. I can see well enough that some of my guests would welcome a story to remind them of their adventurous youths." The big man winked warmly at a few of the older men around the room, and Gawain saw smiles of fond remembrance forming on their faces. Still, the thought of dredging through the whole story, weary and ragged as he was not a welcome one. "My lord, he began, but Lord Bertilac interrupted. "Ah, and here is the true jewel of this castle, my good lady." He gestured to his left, and a vision entered the room. Put simply, she was stunning. It was not one particular aspect of her features. Gawain could not have said, for example, that her smile, or nose, or face, or figure were the reason for her appeal, though indeed they were all perfect. It was more that the sense of her was of something beautiful. She radiated warmth from her very presence, and Gawain felt it stir his soul. Like Lord Bertilac, his wife seemed energized, vital, full of life. She dressed in a pale, slender robe, the simplicity of which only seemed to emphasize her own beauty. Sapphire blue eyes, framed by dark auburn tresses, fixed on him, and he quite forgot what he was supposed to do next. Aware of the silence in the room, he stumbled out a greeting. "Your servant, my lady," he bowed. "Thank you for the hospitality of your halls." "You are most welcome, Sir Knight," she said, and the way she said it completed his captivation. "May I introduce my lady, Mallory?" Lady Bertilac went on, and another woman appeared by her side. She was as unlike Lady Bertilac as it was possible to be. Worn and wizened, she hunched in on herself, and seemed to draw in all the warmth around her. Dressed in dark, gaudy robes, she seemed almost shapeless and sapped of colour. Her white hair was lank and lifeless, and where Lady Bertilac seemed to radiate energy like a gift to all around her, this woman seemed to be hoarding all of hers within her, guarding it jealously. The one concession to vitality was in her dark eyes, which seemed as sharp as pinpricks, and darted all over the room like a raven searching for carrion. None of this seemed to disturb Lady Bertilac, though, who linked arms with her warmly. "Ah, welcome, Nanny," she said to the older woman. "This is Sir Gawain of the court of Camelot, our honoured guest." "Is it indeed?" she asked, and Gawain was taken aback by her voice. He had expected to be dry and brittle and lifeless, but this was instead rich and mellifluous, though low and without warmth. "Yes," she went on slowly, "I see he is a man to observe with great interest." Gawain was unnerved by her words, but no one else seemed disturbed, so he made his bow. "Sir Gawain was just about to tell us of his adventures," Lord Bertilac broke in. "Unless, Sir Knight, you are too tired for tales today. I am sure we can wait until tomorrow, though I should be sad to do so." A few moments ago, Gawain would have liked nothing more than to retire to a nice warm bed and sleep for a week. But then Lady Bertilac had entered the room, and now he felt he was not quite ready to leave her company. Not just yet. "I am sure, my lord," he told the man, "that I could manage a few tales." "Yes!" barked the man in a heartfelt laugh. I am so pleased to hear you say it. Fetch the man a chair and get some food, and we shall hear his story." So Gawain was brought a chair, and he began the story of his journey from the beginning. He left out the hooded figure, though, some instinct within him telling him it might not be best to appear so paranoid on their first meeting. He could not tell whether everyone believed his story, though they listened politely enough. No doubt some there thought it was all tall tales and exaggeration, but he did see a few heads nodding along, and there was silence when he finished. "Sir Gawain of the Green Axe, indeed?" asked Bertilac. "Sir Gawain Dragonslayer, I call you. Sir Gawain Trollsbane." He laughed heartily, and once again that energy within him was plain for all to see. Raising a glass, he called out a toast. "Sir Gawain Trollsbane," he called, and all the room echoed. As they raised their glasses and drank, though, Gawain felt a prickling on the back of his neck like he was being watched. Looking around, he saw the lady's maid, Mallory, was staring at him. Hesitantly, he raised a glass to her. "Perhaps you should be a little more careful with the looks you give Lady Bertilac," said the voice in his head. "It seems you may have aroused the anger of her guardian." Before he could think on it further, though, Lord Bertilac continued. "Gawain, I can see you shall be a fine guest for our festivities," he said, his smile large and genuine. "But I would not be a good host if I kept you from your bed a moment longer. Rest now, Sir Knight, and tomorrow we shall speak more." Gawain could not help but agree, and an attendant was called to lead him upstairs to rooms. He barely stopped to look around him as he entered the room, but hauled himself out of his battered armour with moans of relief, and tumbled straight into bed, and a long, dreamless sleep. Thank you for listening. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is a Settle Stories commission. Written and read for you by Jon Buckeridge. Story consultant was Miriam Sarin. Music was Tectonic by Saedra, downloaded via Uppbeat. It was a Parable Arts production.